Hi guys, it's Jessica, and today I wanted to take a deeper dive into the Ice Planet Barbarian series by Ruby Dixon. A little background for those who are uninitiated. Ice Planet Barbarians is a sci-fi romance alien abduction story. That sounds like a mouthful, but it's kind of important that I preface this story with all of that information. Alien abduction stories have a lot of tropes, whether they're in horror or romance, that are the same. So there is a surprise, there are aliens kind of moment, there is a fear element because the aliens are more technologically advanced and want something that we don't quite know about due to language barriers or their desire not to communicate with us. There is often some mentions of SA or other specifically more graphic depictions in them, even when they're romance stories. And because of this romance book might not be for you. Now, in the case of the Ice Planet Barbarians, the aliens that abduct the girls are not the same aliens that they end up being in romantic relationships with. The way this particular story places it in the first book, if you don't know that this is a common trope and something to expect or to know that's coming, it might come out of nowhere on you. It might be very surprising and upsetting, even though it's only a couple paragraphs. Overall, I do think these stories are really fun, they're sweet, they're cinnamon rolly, but there are some things that I think are troubling about it or that we should talk about and address in more depth. And part of what I like about romance stories as a whole, and especially like this take on a traditional bodice ripper style story, is that we're exploring women's sexuality, the kind of choices that women have or don't have in relationships, and how that evolves in different places. Obviously, in a traditional bodice ripper story, these were originally written to force women to accept their place in a society where they would be married off and expected to do their duty, and later it became more popular for women to write these for other women to explore what kind of joys they could find in an arranged marriage or in a marriage where they are expected to behave and perform certain ways. And even after that, in a more modern society, it does explore an unequal power dynamic within relationships, how people respond when they are in a situation where there are no good options or where the options are limited, finding your own happiness, making peace with that. All of those elements are here in Ice Planet Barbarian. We're just going to talk about the initial girls. If this gets a lot of likes and attention, then we'll go ahead and we'll start discussing some of the other stories too. The relationships in Ice Planet Barbarian, while they have a romantic element and they have steamy scenes and it's all like fun and enjoyable times, the main reason most of these characters end up having relations is to have a baby. So because of that, it's very heteronormative, and especially in the beginning of the story, I found it jarring how straight it was. I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit right now. Spoilers for these stories. In the beginning, when the girls meet the blue aliens that are gonna be their romantic partners, it's a mostly male tribe with only 2 women left. And both of those women are already married, or in this case, mated off to other men. So it's just a bunch of single dudes who have no hope of ever getting laid with a woman anyways. And I found it really interesting that none of them had explored relationships with each other. It just seemed like a missed opportunity to me. Even if the aliens weren't gay, having a bisexual element in there would have made sense to me, forming romantic relationships or even close friendships and partnerships, aromantic relationships. No one in this alien race is anything but straight. And I found that to be like very erasing, and I'm on book 16 and that does not change. The other thing that is sort of weird is that none of the women are bisexual or lesbians. And I know in this case, I think there's like 12 girls and we're only going to talk about 6 girl stories, but it's weird that none of them form relationships with each other, or that they don't form some kind of threesome, or there isn't some sort of situation where like, yes, they mate for reproductive purposes, because it's complicated and we'll get to why they would mate for reproductive purposes even though they're in a relationship with someone else. But in theory, they could reproduce and then go back to that other relationship. It might have been too complicated for a romance novel, and honestly, I don't think that Ruby Dixon expected to write as many of these as she ended up writing. In the first 3, pretty clear that she meant this to be a trilogy. So Ice Planet Barbarians #1 is a story about Georgie and her eventual relationship with Vectel. And as I said, they start on an alien spaceship. The aliens are the mean bad aliens that have abducted them. Something goes wrong with the ship and they jettison the cargo bay all the girls are staying on. Once they get to the planet, they elect for Georgie to go out and find some kind of help or food or shelter. It's very cold on the planet. They know right away they're not on Earth because there are 2 suns. And there are some tongue-in-cheek Star Wars references going on here that I didn't care for because I am an OG Star Wars hater. Haven't liked it since the first trilogy, guys. But I think it makes sense for Ruby Dixon to use Star Wars here because it is really well known. And she wrote this in 2015. This is before all of the new Star Wars controversy came out. So we have to sort of give her that prop as well. Anyways, Georgie goes out and she gets caught in a snare by her soon-to-be love interest, Vectel. She is unconscious because all the blood flowed to her head since she was trapped upside down. Vectel finds her and his cooey resonates. Here's where we get to start to talk about the actual dynamics of these relationships and mating. So on this ice planet, there's a toxin in the air that will kill you within a week. The way to get around that, both for the blue alien people and for the humans, is to take on a symbiote called a cooey. The cooey does a bunch of things. First of all, it keeps you from being poisoned and makes you more acclimated to the cold weather. It gives you advanced healing, and it also does this thing called resonating, which is where it identifies your best gene match, and it also identifies when you're at peak time to have kids, and it resonates and makes you really horny, and it resonates for the other person and makes them really horny too, and the two of you get together and just have sex until you have a baby. And this is going to be the premise of how all the girls get together, which is definitely a little disappointing because it feels like they could have at least one couple that doesn't resonate, or they could have a bi couple or a lesbian or gay couple, and then deal with what happens when one part of that couple resonates for someone else. Do they, create a threesome? Do they get together solely for mating purposes and come back to their partner? There's a whole bunch of ways they could deal with this that could have been really interesting, and we never really get into that. We only really explore the dynamic of you no longer have a choice in who you marry, and when you marry that person, which in this case we're calling mating, you will have a baby right away. Obviously the girls are super upset once they learn all this information. Of them all, Georgie, because she is a little bit more adventurous, a little less thoughtful, she takes it the best. And I think too it helps that she spent a lot of time with Vectel. The two of them have sort of grown on each other. They first have a language barrier, they get over the language barrier, they learn that, Vectel's part of a tribe, he's the leader of his tribe, Georgie's kind of the leader of these girls, and they're gonna get some help for the girls. Georgie insists that it has to be the girls' choice whether or not they take the cooey on and whether or not they choose to mate, whether or not they resonate. And because Vectel is super in love with her, he agrees to this, even though it's clear a lot of his single, unmated hunter folk are not happy. And it's a real cultural barrier here because the Sakui / the blue aliens have grown up knowing that their romantic partner will be chosen for them by the cooey. They have expected this their whole life. They haven't really gone around considering what kind of options they could have or if they should explore further romances or interests, because they know eventually it's not going to matter. They'll resonate or they won't, and the person they resonate to will be their life partner. Obviously this is very different than how humans are raised, so they don't 100% understand why humans are resistant to the resonate idea, and they don't understand how that could be scary. They also don't understand the idea of not being ready for children. In their mind, the cooey tells you when you're ready. You just are. You're confident about that and you know it, but like with humans where we have a lot of birth control options, it's not the same. And of course too, another element that's not really touched in these books but it's worth noting is the men, they do the mating thing with the resonance, but they're not going to have to carry the child, all the potential life-threatening situation that goes on with birthing children. This is something that women have to consider. This is like an extra layer on top of these other cultural barriers going on. The other thing is that Georgie learns about her resonance after she's already mated with Vectel, and when she did the mating, she thought that because they were two separate species, species that couldn't get pregnant, and she's kind of like rudely alerted to the fact that actually the whole reason Bechtel wanted to bang her was because he thought that they could get pregnant, and that she probably already is pregnant based off of how Resonance is responding. You know, Georgie handles very well, much better than any of the other characters would have. I think that she was a great first character for them to start out with. I think the personality that Ruby Dixon gave her was just perfect for an introductory character and for a character in the situation that she finds herself in. She's very plucky, she keeps going, she's flexible enough to move with things. I find Georgie really annoying in other iterations of the story, and it's because she's really not that smart. I feel like she sides with Bechtel a lot in situations where it does not make sense that she would side with Bechtel. Like, she just has decided that he is the leader, he's the man, they need to adopt this culture, and there's not enough pushback or understanding or a larger picture negotiation that she could be doing and that she's in a position to do and doesn't do. I know in the beginning maybe she felt like she needed to side with Bechtel because she was the outsider and she wanted his favor, she wanted to feel safe, or whatever the situation was. Further into the book, she's still like this. Like, I just feel like she comes off not very caring of the other women, even though she keeps saying she cares about them and she's thinking about them. And especially in Liz's story, which we'll talk about when we get to Liz's story. Georgie, while she was on the spaceship, Liz was a super good friend to her. The two of them became very close. I felt like they bonded a lot. I also feel like Georgie just abandons Liz and doesn't care about her once the Bechtel-Georgie relation happens. I thought like the girl friendships and the bonding would have continued in the story. And specifically with Georgie, they just don't seem to. She seemed like a fickle lady that I wouldn't be friends with. Now, in this story, Georgie brings the other guys, they all get the little cooies and the ladies. Everything ends up happily ever after for Georgie. There are a couple girls who had been in stasis, they hadn't been awake on the spaceship, and when they let them out, they're really shell-shocked and crying. Georgie's best friend Liz is kidnapped by one of the scariest, meanest looking Sakui in the group, and Georgie kind of laughs it off as like,
haha, sucks to be that guy because Liz is feisty.
We've seen that Liz is pretty resilient, but we haven't seen her as feisty. She stood up for herself and for other girls. She's been a great, like, second in command to Georgie and supportive of Georgie's plans, and I kind of found this to be a little sexist in how Georgie views Liz, that she found Liz's actions to be aggressive or angry. The other thing is she's like,
haha, too bad for Ruhush.
But it's not really too bad for Ruhush because he's the one with all the power. Liz can't go anywhere without him. She can't get back to the others. She can't save herself. There's nowhere for her to go. She doesn't know how to feed or take care of herself on this very inhospitable planet. Georgie should be more worried about it, or she should at least send more people out looking for Liz to make sure that Liz is really okay staying with Ruhush. The other thing that I've really glossed over in this book is that Bechtel goes down on Georgie before they ever say a word while Georgie is unconscious. So that's like a weird non-consensual situation. But when Georgie wakes up, she goes with it. So, I don't know what to say about that. I don't think these stories did very well talking about different sexual positions, different sexual preferences, and how people respond differently to the same stimuli, or how different couples interact differently. It seems like all of these couples like the same things. There's pretty vanilla standard positioning and standard sex acts. It was like,
okay, I mean, I guess that's fine. This is enough of this. It's all described the same way, and all the men view it the same way, and all the women respond the same way. There's just not enough going on here.
Obviously, Book 2, Barbarian Alien, talks about Liz and Rahush's relationship, and this is where we get a little bit more information about how the resonance thing works, because apparently Rahush's family, they resonated, but they did not get along or like each other. So they resonated and had Rahush, and Rahush's mom went back to her pleasure mate, basically just rejected Rahush's dad, and I'm not really sure where Rahush was in this situation, if he lived with dad or lived with mom or just lived with the tribe because they live in these communal caves. His parents resonate a second time. Rahush's mom does not want to give in to resonance. She wants to just stay with her pleasure mate. She's like,
oh, I don't like you. You're gross or whatever, and I refuse.
But the chief decides that she has to honor the resonance, so he is forcing her to sleep with this dude. But once the resonance is over, she doesn't have to stay with him. Which I guess for like a barbarian society, this is like an interesting compromise. And also, this is the only case we get where people who resonate don't want to stay together. This is literally the only example. It was probably a very unprecedented situation for that chief to try and figure out. Rahush's dad is not happy with this solution, so he steals his son and his wife and goes out into the wilderness so she can't leave him. I'm not entirely sure why Rahush's mom doesn't just trek back. The other Sakui women we see in this world are capable of hunting, tracking, and traveling on their own. So it's kind of weird to me that she didn't just leave him and go back. Maybe like Rahush's dad literally kept her tied up, or maybe this is just a loose end that Ruby Dixon didn't really anticipate. Rahush's mother gets pregnant and has the kid, and they have to go on a hunt to get the kui for the child. And during this hunt, Rahush's mother is killed, and Rahush gets the horrible scars and the broken horn that is on his face. And he's so severely injured that Rahush's dad drops him back off at the cave for the tribe to take care of. Rahush's dad pieces out and goes back off into the woods. So Rahush has been very deeply affected by this. He believes that you have to follow the resonance, and that the way to get your woman to do what you want her to do is to drag her off into the woods, which is what he has done with Liz. Although he doesn't plan to leave Liz like his mother was without the tribe's help. As soon as Liz is very pregnant, they're going to go back to the tribe so Liz can be protected and so that he won't risk her life. So I mean, Rahush I guess is a little better than his dad, but he still like has that ingrained,
the woman's opinions or thoughts don't matter. All that matters is the resonance and what I want out of the resonance.
there's no non-consensual touching or whatever. There's a lot of bickering and back and forth. I was kind of like shoulder shruggy on it. I know it's supposed to be an enemies to lovers story. I know I'm only kind of like okay with an enemies to lover story, especially when the power dynamic is so extreme. Liz does eventually warm up to him, and it's debatable whether or not it's Stockholm Syndrome. What's funny about this is, as far as the books go, I don't think it's very romantic, this second story, or like a super good story, but Rahush and Liz's relationship in future stories is so good. I just really enjoy the two of them, their dynamic and their character situation. You know, Liz is a hunter, she has some background with that, and Rahush, when he learns about this, is like,
Sure, you and I can hunt together.
and the two of them do like hunt together and have a good time in the future, and also a little bit in this book too. And they bicker and they argue, and it seems like Liz really leads this relationship. Like there's an initial power discrepancy here. Part of it is because Liz isn't really sure about her footing, she doesn't really understand the rules of this place, what she can and can't do, and whether or not she can take care of herself well enough that she can be without Rahush. But once she sort of starts to learn about how to hunt, and she sort of starts learning the ins and outs of the tribe and gets more comfortable, you can really see that she's the leader, she is the dominant person in their relationship, and Rahush just kind of has to do what she wants. So I guess he can just enjoy this moment in book 2 because it's not going to last very long. Eventually, two of the other hunters do find Liz and Rahush, and at this point in time, they have mated, their resonance is over, and Liz is pregnant, and she's also like pretty happy to be with Rahush. This is her new reality. I don't think that it's actually that valuable for her or any of the other characters to evaluate whether or not she has Stockholm Syndrome. We should just be happy that she's happy. But when she goes back to the tribe, Vectel exiles Rahush, and Liz is stuck living in the communal caves alone. She's not happy about it. She wants to go back to Rahush. She can like see him out in the ridge, and he comes in every day with like a fresh kill for her. And because of this, Liz is like pretty feisty. She starts to like simmer down a little bit, and then she finds out that Vectel was actually considering giving her away to one of the older men in the tribe as like a pleasure mate who would be okay taking care of Rahush's kid when the time came. Liz Liz is pretty pissed off about this. It's bad enough to her that she can just be given away for a resonance, but it's even worse. There's not going to be any resonance. There'll be no more children with this guy, and still someone else is trying to decide who she can and can't boink. So the way that she gets around this is she decides she's going to get exiled too, and that way she can be with Wahoosh. And she does this by taking one of the other Sakui men captive, who is pretty good natured and is just like,
yeah, see, I see what you're doing and I will help you by pretending to be your captive.
This makes Vectel really mad, and this is the beginning of me being like,
good. Vectel and Georgie should always be mad. They're kind of terrible. They just lack the ability to see nuance and lack the ability to lead in a way that makes sense to me.
so I'm glad Vectel's mad, I'm glad Georgie's mad, and I'm glad that Liz got her way at the end of this story. She ends up being exiled with Wahoosh, and the two of them are gonna hunt the whole time together, which is great. That's exactly what Liz wanted. And then when she is too pregnant, which they're not sure when that will be, human women have a 9-month gestational period, but we find out that Sakui women have a 3-year gestational period. Like a half human, half Sakui is probably somewhere in the middle, but we don't really know when. And also it starts to make the resonance thing make a whole lot more sense. If you're a Sakui person, right, and you resonate and you have sex with someone and you're gonna have a baby together with them, you have 3 years to kind of work out a relationship before there's a kid in the picture, even though you get together by mating. Where if you're a human and you do that, it's like 9 months to figure that out before a baby comes. Suddenly, like, some of these resonance things are falling into place in a way that make a little bit more sense to me world building wise. I thought that was like a clever little thing that Ruby Dixon added in. This one is probably the one that was meant to be a close to the Ice Planet Barbarians series. A couple of hints on why I feel that way. When Georgie first woke up in the alien vessel, she became best buddies with Liz and this other girl that we hear in book 3, Kira. Liz is sort of like feisty and funny and spunky and like a great sidekick to Georgie while she's trying to escape the spaceship. And Kira is a more quiet, reserved woman who early on was one of the first girls picked out as one of the extras, as they call them, or the girls who are awake in the spaceship, and they clipped to her ear a translator. We find out in this book it's a little bit more complicated than that. There's parts of the translator that are going in her ear and might be touching on her brain. She's the only girl though with like this silver shell thing on her ear that lets her understand both that aliens that kidnapped her and this mean enforcer alien groups that are on the spaceship and the blue aliens that she now lives with. So it seems to me Georgie befriends these two girls. We got Georgie's romantic story, Liz's romantic story, and now we're closing with Kira's. The other thing that makes me think that this was originally meant to be a trilogy is in Georgie's book. The scene of SA that happens to this red-headed woman named Dominique who seems to speak both French and English, and in Georgie's book, instead of addressing the assault that happened to her and having her get a redemption arc, she just runs out into the snow and kills herself. And I was actually pretty sad about it because I found a character that spoke both French and English to be interesting, especially in what seemed to be a largely American cast. She was attacked to show the kind of tension and stakes that were on the spaceship and then killed off because we didn't want to deal with the consequences, which makes sense when this is a trilogy, but when we expand it out to further stories, we do actually start to deal with SA survivors and other people who have trying situations. Of the original 3, I like Kira's story the least. Kira is okay as far as a character goes. She's a little bit quieter, more reserved, she's anxious, and she takes care of the other girls when Georgie is like in La La Love Land with Vectel and has kind of abandoned the other single women. And Liz is kidnapped and gone. Kira is there at the cave, checking up on all the different women, making sure they feel safe and supported, letting them know it's okay to stay with the women's communal cave group. They don't have to buddy off or feel pressured to be with some of the other men, even though she doesn't know that for a fact. And that's part of the thing that some of the other women say to her, like,
you don't know that. Don't tell me that it's okay when you don't know it's okay.
But you know, Kira is trying to create this supportive, loving environment. She's trying to make all the women feel safe and trying to make sure that they're meshing with the tribe, fitting in, taking their time to learn about where their new place is and having some sense of contentment or happiness while doing it. The other thing we learn up front about Kira is that she was really sick as a child. Her appendix burst and the infection in her appendix had spread to her reproductive system, and now she's sterile. Kira is very afraid about the aliens finding out that she's sterile. One of the reasons they've all been accepted into the tribe is because eventually they'll resonate and provide children, and Kira can't do that. So she's trying to like fit in, find her place, feel more comfortable, and also she's trying to keep herself from romantic entanglements because she knows she'll never resonate. So all of this sounds like a really compelling and interesting character, and it is. The problem for me comes with Kira's romance. Aeko has decided that he likes Kira just because and I'm okay with that. He's kind of like a slightly funny, cheery kind of guy. What I don't like about Aeko is that he continually calls Kira sad eyes. When he originally uses this term, he's talking about this underlying element that he's observed in Kira that other people aren't seeing, like she's putting on a brave face. The rest of the tribe and the women don't see that there's something that's hurting Kira. There's like an unsureness there that he sees that other people don't see, and he wants to address it and care for her. That part is sweet. What's not sweet is that he continues to call her sad eyes like it's a cute pet name while they're hot and heavy. And I just don't like the idea that her unhappiness turns him on. And using that name like that at least implies it, if not outright states that like even though he wants her to be happy, her sadness is like sexy to him in some way. The other thing I don't like about the Aeko and Kira love story is they do end up getting together when Kira's not resonating, which I think is sweet and is about like how even in this tribe there are relationships that you can find with other people, meanings and intimacy without having children. And also, just because you can't have children for whatever reason, it doesn't mean that you're broken or undeserving of love. I liked all of that, but like at the very end, Kira resonates to Aeko and they get together and have babies. The Kui cured her inability to become pregnant, which I mean is possible based off of how the Kui work, but is not so great in a larger discussion about what makes a woman and what makes a relationship work or not work. I just feel like it was a missed opportunity. And in the case where this was a trilogy, it makes sense to end with Kira being healed and living happily ever after with babies just like Liz and Georgie. But in the case where it's 22 stories now, it doesn't make as much sense and is actively unpleasant. The one thing that is great about Kira's story is it is a story about Kira to a certain degree taking her own power back. The silver translation thing, it doesn't just let her hear other people, it also amplifies other voices so she can hear when the aliens are coming back to get the cargo. And she worries that there's a tracking device on her silver ear thing, and because of that they'll be able to find her and the other women. So she goes to the ancestor ship, which I haven't mentioned to this point but I probably should, is a spaceship. The Sukui 200-300 years ago crashed, and they're also foreign to the planet. Even though it can't fly or take off, it has some functioning capabilities, like it can translate, it can provide language to other people, which is how the Sukui learned English and how the humans learned Sukui. Also apparently provides some surgical elements, which is what Kira goes to the ship to take advantage of. Hopefully keep the aliens from capturing any of the other humans. She eventually meets up with the aliens while they're searching for the other humans. She gets captured, she goes aboard the ship, she takes down the ship, and then she leaves victorious knowing that there are no more aliens coming to get them. This is like a really cool taking back your power. We got to see a little bit of this with Georgie in her first book, because when she joins the group she sees the stakes and realizes that nothing good is going to happen to the humans and encourages them to have an uprising. And it's really nice for Kira, who's kind of a more quiet character, who's kind of been playing supportive nurture in the background, to get this kind of triumphant moment within the story where she gets to be like a badass. The problem is that it's immediately undercut by her resonating with Aeko. Such a missed opportunity, made me so unhappy. Fourth book in the series is Barbarian Mine. This is the story between Harlow and Hook. I never mentioned it, but Harlow also goes with Kira to the spaceship, and when they get attacked by aliens, Harlow is kidnapped, and everyone just like kind of abandons her and assumes that she ran away out of fear, which there was no reason to assume that. Harlow doesn't know how to survive on this planet on her own. Like, she has no skills at hunting or making a fire. So why she would have run away without any help? No sense. This is the beginning of the blue aliens being kind of stupid in ways that I don't think is believable. In the third book, there were these weird tracks outside of the hut they slept in, and it was like these three-toed tracks, and they're like,
I don't know who this could be. I've never seen tracks like this.
it's literally tracks of another blue alien exactly the same as them. It's confusing that these tracks are outside, that the hunter didn't come in. They shouldn't have been like,
Hey, I've never seen these tracks before.
and we will see this in other books, like there's these angry creatures called metlaks. And all the hunters are familiar with these metlaks, but for some reason there are several instances in this book where there are metlak tracks and the hunters don't know what they are. It's just like, for a hunter-gatherer society that's almost all hunt, no gather, who've been living here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and this is a known predator, they should know what these metlak tracks look like. Just like they should know what their own people's tracks look like, even if they're like,
There's no reason for a Sakui to be out here, and if another Sakui was out here, there's no reason for them not to come into the cave and be like, what up, yo?
that should have been the conversation. It shouldn't have been like,
I've never seen tracks like this.
but whatever. Harlow gets abducted. We find out Rook is Rahush's younger brother, and because Rook has been out here for a very long time on his own, he doesn't speak Sakui or English, and he doesn't really understand what's going on. He's just like a naked wild boy. And I think him and Harlow's relationship is really sweet. First, the way Harlow handles it is so great. She has a moment where she panics, and then she realizes, like,
Oh no, when I left these two people to die, so even if I could find my way back to the tribe, which I can't, they might not forgive me for the death of these two warriors, and I might be in trouble.
Harlow didn't abandon anyone. She got knocked out by Rook, and by the time she had woken up, it was too late for her to do anything. Not to mention she was in a cave that she didn't know and around nothing familiar. So she's like,
Alright, I gotta explain to this person what I need to survive, because he's like wandering around the woods naked, and as a human, I will die if I do that in these cold temperatures.
so she sort of like starts communicating, starts teaching him language, starts teaching him how to like build fires and preserve meat and get furs and all that good stuff. And during that time, she realizes she's resonating and what that means. But Kruk doesn't really realize, so there's all of that cute coming to terms with feelings and romance and developing that. And of course, eventually Harlow ends up pregnant, and the two of them at that point are speaking language together, and he understands that that's his kid and what that means. They call babies kids, by the way. And, you know, he wants to have a family with her and provide for her, and everything seems to be going really well until during the pregnancy, Harlow starts to feel sick and dizzy and have sharp pains. And luckily around this time, Liz and Rahush find Harlow and Rook. They explain to Rook that even though he thinks all of them are bad people because his father told him to stay away from the tribe and that the tribe was bad, that Harlow is really sick and needs to see the healer. Rook overcomes his childhood terror at the tribe, and he learns that Harlow's Kui actually has to work really hard to keep Harlow alive. So hard that it is making the pregnancy difficult, and anytime Harlow has a pregnancy going forward, or anytime that Harlow is injured, she's probably going to need a healer there immediately to help her. And this is a hard turning point for Rook, because he thought that he would get the healer's help and then they'd be able to go back out living on their own. And even Harlow, to a certain extent, was wanting that. She had come to really enjoy her life with Rook, and that was like a very sweet and enjoyable portion of the book. But Rook has to come to terms with the fact that he's going to have to live in the tribe, and not just come to terms with it, but learn to embrace it and find his place in the tribe. I know for some people the being stolen away and the consent is going to be an issue, but for me it was just so sweet and like such a slow burn relationship that ended up with both Harlow and Rook having so much joy. It's hard to resent it, at least for me. So in the fifth book is Ice Planet Holiday, and to be honest, it's like a Christmas special, and I don't usually like those. so I only kind of skimmed it. The part that I liked, that I actually ended up reading through, is a relationship between Claire and Beck, and the two of them ended up pleasure mating, and there have been casual mentions of them going forward about how like Beck tells her what to do and no one ever sees Claire because she is like hidden away in the cave that she shares with Beck. When we get Claire sort of talking about how she comes from like a series of abusive relationships back on Earth, and it like figures she fell into one in an ice planet with aliens as well, and that this holiday is going to be her opportunity to get away from Beck, which she uses and ends up resonating with some young kid right away. I liked her realizing that she was in a place she didn't want to be and her trying to find the strength to get away from it. And I also liked the dynamics between her and Beck, like where they actually are able to have a conversation and confrontation. Like Beck isn't just like this totally evil, nefarious dude. It's clear that Claire's not the right woman for Beck, the same way that Beck is not the right man for her, even if Beck has done some damage to her in the process, like some emotional and mental damage, or he's tapped into some emotional and mental scars that she had from her life on Earth. It's short, so you can go ahead and read through it pretty quickly, even if you don't like it. I read this holiday special and the next holiday special, but the third holiday special I totally skipped. I just got tired of reading Christmas stories. I'm not really into Christmas. Sorry. This one is about Tiffany and Salute. This is where I think Ruby Dixon realized that she was going to have a much longer running series than she originally thought. So she started to try and co-opt the narrative that she set in the first book where Dominique was assaulted and then killed herself. Now we're working with Tiffany, who it turns out was also assaulted on the alien spaceship and has been dealing with the fallout for a year and a half now. She's one of two other girls who have still not resonated. Part of how Tiffany has dealt with her assault is she has thrown herself into working in many different projects on the ice planet. So she's really good at tanning, she's good at making all kinds of stuff, she's an okay cook, and she's trying to farm. Before the humans got here, the aliens ate almost predominantly meat, but the humans found some roots that they can eat, and Tiffany's trying to make them more readily available. But unfortunately, because Tiffany is so skilled, and also apparently Tiffany is very pretty and friendly and upbeat and energetic, a lot of the single men are paying a significant amount of attention to her, and they're totally ignoring the other women. Luckily for Tiffany, the other unmated human woman, Josie, is incredibly kind and benevolent and wonderfully spirited. She's so supportive of Tiffany. She loves Tiffany too. She's not jealous of Tiffany. And I've got to tell you, all of the other humans and Sakui have been portraying Josie as this really stupid chatterbox that they find annoying. And I don't freaking understand why they don't like Josie, because she's so kind and generous and giving. She is very supportive to anyone in her circle. She seems to be very sensitive when other people are upset, and she looks for ways to help make situations better. And especially in this situation where it's just her and Tiffany who are left, Josie could be like really bitter and upset by this, or she could be really hurt, or she could be like mean and catty, and she never does any of those things. And I just think it speaks to Josie's character, and I feel like me and Josie on this ice planet would be friends. Tiffany finds all of the male attention she gets really stressful, and it continues to build. She's terrified of resonance because it will be another situation where her sexuality will be taken out of her hands, her ability to choose, and she just doesn't know if she can handle it. She tried to have like a couple of intimate moments with some of the Sakui earlier on, and she freaked out. Eventually, she tells Josie like she can't handle all the attention that's going on, and she is gonna run away because she just can't face this. And Josie's like,
No, don't leave me. We're the only two left. We're best friends, and I care a lot about you, and I will figure something out.
So Josie comes up with this contest, and she keeps all of the suitors occupied with it. And the winner of the contest will take Josie to the Elder's Cave to get Sakui language. So it's not promising Josie as a pleasure mate, or promising a date, or promising resonance, or even promising more attention. I thought this was like pretty clever of Josie, actually. And also, Josie will be with Tiffany when they go to the Elder Caves. So Josie didn't even promise alone time with Tiffany, just that they would get to go with Tiffany and Josie to the Elder Cave. Josie is badass. She is a real hero and a champion. Kira is disapproving of this plan because Aeko and her are now like the leaders of the second cave system they're all living in, and she thinks this will breed further competition and cause discord among the hunters that Aeko is going to have to deal with. And this is something that I had an issue with Georgie over, and I also have an issue with Kira over. Like, look at the women and how they're handling things. Like, Tiffany is about to have a mental breakdown because of all this attention. No one has stopped it. It's all been boys will be boys. It's only natural that they feel this way. Of course they like Tiffany. No one says anything that they don't give this attention to Josie. All of this is so wrong and awful to me. And the fact that Kira goes with it is like, eh. Anyways, there is one hunter out of all of these hunters who is kind of friends with Tiffany and not just like competing, trying to like push her into sexual favors or preferences that she doesn't want. He finds out that she has been assaulted and that she's really afraid of resonance, and just in general she's not capable of having a more intimate relationship with people because of this experience, and he wants to help her try and get over it, which she agrees to, and leads to a lot of different tender scenes between the two of them. I think this is probably some of the steamiest scenes in the whole book and is really very delightful. I personally like hurt comfort stories, so I like when one partner is trying to overcome something else and the other partner is very supportive, caring, patient, nurturing, and sort of like helps lead them or provide them options for getting over those hurdles. I really like where Saluk and Tiffany's relationship goes, and I like the ending for them. I was rooting for them. I have to admit, I wasn't sure I was going to like this in the beginning because we get some of Saluk's perspective, and he's talking about how Tiffany is his, he knows Tiffany is his, he's gonna force his kui to resonate, and then everyone will know that Tiffany is his. And I didn't like that like overconfidence, possessive, like trying to force it kind of energy. And I thought that it was gonna clash a lot with Tiffany's own needs for freedom and choice. It ends up working out where once Luke understands what the issue is and understands what Tiffany has been through, he knows like how to be patient and caring and supportive of her. The last of the original girls to get mated off is Josie in book 7, and Josie is actually an interesting case. One of the reasons she hasn't resonated up until now is she had an IED, and because of that she couldn't get pregnant, which means no resonance, and she's been pretty desperate to resonate. She's gone up to the spaceship to try and get a surgery the same way Kira did with her ear communicator, except the surgery machine is conveniently broken. And it seems like kind of a random pointless detail for the surgery machine to be broken, because the IED falls out like at the end of the 6th book, and then Josie resonates right away with someone. And it's like,
well, if you were gonna solve the problem for her right away, what would it matter whether it was a surgery or it was just like the kui forcing the foreign object out eventually?
Either way, Josie is now ready to resonate, and she does. Unfortunately, she resonates with the one salty, surly guy that she doesn't get along with. And I think this might be one of my favorite stories. I really like the Harlow and Rook, and I really like Tiffany and Saluk's relationship, but I think Josie and Hayden's relationship might be one of my favorites. This is another enemies to lovers situation, unlike Liz and Rahush, where Rahush kind of like forces his situation onto Liz. Hayden refuses to force Josie into a relationship. We find out that Hayden had previously resonated to somebody else, and that person had gotten sick and died, and Hayden had also gotten so sick that his kui had died, so this is his second kui they put in him, which FYI is how he gets a second chance at resonating. And even though he never got to take his first mate, he has felt very pained that he let that opportunity pass by him, but he also realizes how important the resonance is and having a willing partner, and he is not gonna hang out with Josie until Josie says,
yeah, we will be mates.
And Josie is super against being a family with Hayden because she feels that Hayden hates her and is really mean to her, and she doesn't want to bring children into a non-loving family. Apparently we find out Josie's family isn't just terrible, which we learned in the Christmas book. She is a foster child. Her parents didn't want her, and she was bounced from foster home to foster home, and she was abused in some of those homes, and also she was abused on the alien ship. And she thinks like if it was just gonna be her and Hayden, maybe she could get over that, but she can't get over the idea of allowing another child to suffer the way she did, or even suffer in a way that's similar to how she did through the foster system. And I just think like this story hits all of the beats. And this is another like her comfort story, and it just shows how resilient and strong Josie is, both how she handles trauma and abuse in her past, and how she deals with the demand for resonance and refuses to succumb to it. Josie and Hayden go over a month without doing anything, and in fact Josie, when she realizes the resonance is too much for her, she leaves the tribe herself and goes out and takes care of herself, like brings her own rations, starts her own fires, tracks, does all the stuff. Also at the end, Josie finds a spaceship, and in the spaceship are more women, which is how this series goes on after Hayden and Josie get together. Just the way that they have a series of miscommunication, finally see the other person's pain and realize how each one of them can help each other heal. And I'm just really happy for Josie because people have been so mean to her in this book, and she's been so kind. I'll admit I was a little bit worried about Hayden and where we were going with this, but I feel like the whole story is portrayed in a way that helps everyone build empathy. And that's gonna take us through the first 7 books in the Ice Planet Barbarians. I loved reading these books, and I have enjoyed reading further in the series. I think there's a lot of interesting different situations that Ruby Dixon tackles, and I think she tackles most of them really well. But let me know, have you read the Ice Planet Barbarians series? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let me know in those comments down below. If you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. I produce videos that come out twice a week. If you're looking for more sci-fi reads or sci-fi shows, feel free to check out my sci-fi playlist here. And if you're looking for more Kindle Unlimited stories from a fantasy or science fiction perspective, feel free to check out my Kindle Unlimited playlist here. I hope you guys are having a great day, and as always, keep reading. I'll talk to you next time. Bye!